deadly drug disguised to look like candy is now circulating, and it's called rainbow fentanyl.
In Seattle, chaos erupted at dawn as federal agents surged through warehouses, ports, and quiet suburban streets, uncovering a fully operational Sinaloa command cell hidden in the heart of the city. Operation Takeback American 18-month joint D&ICE mission revealed how deeply cartel influence had penetrated U.S. soil, exposing not just another drug ring, but the moment the fentanyl war arrived at home, with Homeland Security officials warning that Mexican cartels were now tracking, harassing, and targeting border and immigration agents, as 19 Sinaloa-linked suspects faced 37 federal charges spanning conspiracy, trafficking, and weapons violations. Raids from Seattle to Tacoma yielded nearly 4,800 pounds of methamphetamine, 269 pounds of fentanyl, 23 pounds of cocaine, over 6 pounds of heroin, and 23 firearms, some modified for automatic fire, along with explosive materials stashed inside suburban garages. Each seizure representing a fragment of a sprawling criminal infrastructure. Investigators traced the network from Tacoma to the fentanyl alone equating to nearly 7 million lethal doses, enough to erase the populations of Seattle and Tacoma repeatedly. While 51 arrests nationwide connected back to the same supply chain, this was no lucky break but the culmination of a pursuit built on cracked encrypted messages and tracked wire transfers, dismantling a system that treated American highways like conveyor belts. The cartel behind it was no newcomer but a long-adaptable Sinaloa empire expanding inside U.S. borders through a self-sustaining operation blending local contacts, legitimate trade routes, and financial channels, all overseen by two brothers, Rosario Abel, Wayne Camargo Bonuelos, 31, and Francisco Fernando Camargo 24, who, from strongholds in sea, coordinated a pipeline from Mexico through California's freight depots to Washington's ports and warehouse districts, controlling the logistics rather than carrying the drugs themselves. Freight forwarders, trucking companies, and customs brokers, many legitimate, became unwitting cogs in their strategy as encrypted communications moved across dummy accounts and foreign servers. Semi-trucks hauling fertilizer or household goods concealed chemically sealed containers of narcotics, and couriers shuttled loads along the I-5 corridor under ordinary manifests. Two garages and rentals from Everett to Tacoma. The case, one of the most significant in Pacific Northwest history, began 2 years earlier with small undercover drug buys in Tacoma and expanded into coordinated raids across 11 Seattle area locations, culminating in a massive August takedown as the brothers funneled finances through cryptocurrency wallets in Delaware and Mexico City-based shell companies, posing as distant investors while digital coin deposits were converted into pesos or funneled through import-export fronts. The money trail threading back through a sophisticated network that was finally exposed when federal agents closed in. One transfer vanished before agents could trace it, and another had already disappeared. But among those arrested on U.S. soil were essential operatives, including 44-year-old truck driver Isabel Berry, caught transporting hundreds of pounds of methamphetamine and fentanyl across state lines, and Jose Felix Herman, a 34-year-old Mexican national, previously deported in 2013, who had re-entered the U.S. illegally to oversee financial transactions and manage redistribution networks, each now facing a minimum of 10 years in federal prison with potential life sentences under U.S. drug and weapons statutes. The sheer scale of their operation underscored an undeniable truth: Sinaloa wasn't just smuggling drugs. It was running an industry, its routes, warehouses, and logistics functioning with the precision of a global corporation. And the Pacific Northwest, with its busy ports and constant freight movement, had quietly evolved into one of its major distribution hubs, with Seattle and Tacoma serving as perfect camouflage as legitimate commerce disguised a criminal supply chain in what investigators called logistics-based infiltration, a model in which the cartel no longer needed to physically cross borders because it had already integrated itself into the system. The motive remained the same: profit, but in Seattle, that pursuit collided with the devastating human price of addiction, as Washington's 2023 overdose count reached 3,477 deaths, 76% linked directly to fentanyl, with King County alone surpassing 1,000 fatalities for the first time, morgues nearing capacity, and first responders handling multiple overdose calls daily, while federal lab results revealed that 5 out of 10 seized counterfeit pills contained more than 2 milligrams of fentanyl, enough to kill an average adult within minutes. And these pills weren't marketed as street drugs, but disguised as Adderall, oxycodone, and Xanax, appearing harmless to parents while the D recognized them as part of a deliberate strategy to target new users. Behind each statistic lived a tragedy: families discovering unresponsive children, schools reporting students collapsing in bathrooms, and emergency rooms overwhelmed by surges tied to counterfeit pills, turning the investigation into the revelation of an epidemic and the stark recognition that a global cartel had learned to embed itself in the fabric of every day. American Life, with police tracing many recent overdose deaths to local distribution, cells dismantled during the operation as public health data showed fentanyl overtaking every other cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45, surpassing car accidents, suicide, and gun violence combined. Seattle, once perceived as distant from border smuggling corridors, had become undeniable proof that the crisis was national, not regional. Its overdose spike mirroring an American collapse as isolated tragedies transformed into a full-scale epidemic. While agents seized not only drugs but an arsenal of firearms and more than $650,000 in cash. Evidence of a network where guns and narcotics moved hand in hand, and by the time raids commenced, investigators had already mapped more than a dozen interconnected cells from Seattle to Tacoma and throughout the smaller towns of Puget Sound, each responsible for manufacturing, storage, transport, or street-level distribution, forming a web so intricate that dismantling one component rarely halted the others. Federal officials accused local governments of hindering progress, with ICE leaders asserting that cities like Seattle had ignored repeat offenders and pointing to multiple cartel-linked suspects, who had been previously deported only to re-enter without detection, warning that if local governments refused cooperation, federal agencies would divert resources and enforce the law independently because, as one official stated, public safety cannot be optional, signaling clearly that this was no temporary campaign. It marked a national shift in strategy and effort to dissolve the long-standing divide between federal immigration, enforcement, and local jurisdictions, and Seattle suddenly became the epicenter of that new approach as ICE announced plans to intensify operations across the city, targeting undocumented individuals for detention and deportation as part of a broader federal crackdown. That evening, Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell stepped before the microphones to condemn the move as dangerous overreach, invoking the 10th Amendment and declaring that federal agents could not compel local police to aid in detentions or deportations, vowing that Seattle would remain a sanctuary city committed to humanity and due process even under pressure, a stance met with applause from immigrant rights advocates and sharp criticism from federal authorities. By week's end, downtown Seattle transformed into the Stage 4 dueling movements as protesters filled the streets outside City Hall, bearing signs reading "Shutdown, ICE and Sanctuary for All," their chants echoing through the financial district while officers worked to keep the demonstrations peaceful. And just blocks away, counter-protesters rallied beneath American flags, holding photos of overdose victims and demanding stricter immigration laws. Images that captured the stark divide, one side calling for compassion, the other for control. Behind the public confrontation lay the operation that explained the federal urgency, a mission where the DIC, FBI, and ATF united under a single command structure months in the making, each agency bringing specialized expertise, the detracing, narcotics, ICE managing immigration and logistics data, the FBI conducting digital forensics, and the ATF overseeing weapons and explosives recovery, forming a coordinated intelligence system capable of responding instantly to new leads. And during a 36-hour window, more than 600 agents, officers, and analysts executed synchronized raids as helicopters hovered over Tacoma industrial parks. Drones mapped suspected warehouses in Arlington, and federal strike teams breached safehouses across Whidbey Island, one of which contained grenade components and volatile chemicals stored beside narcotics, forcing units to secure the site. The operation stretched from dense urban centers to isolated rural backroads, mirroring the way the cartel had exploited Washington's vast geography to hide its supply chain. And the resulting indictment spanned counties and borders, naming traffickers, couriers, and a truck driver from Snohomish King and Pierce counties, with more than 20 suspects in custody and 6 fugitives still at large, ultimately becoming the largest multi-defendant indictment filed in the Western District of Washington in over 20 years, with 37 federal counts covering conspiracy, distribution, weapons possession, and money laundering, all structured by prosecutors to prevent plea deals that might unravel the case and to ensure every cartel-linked defendant faced the full weight of federal law. Officials hailed the mission as a template for future anti-cartel operations, crediting its success to advances in digital forensics and data fusion as analysts traced cryptocurrency across exchanges, matched GPS data from seized phones, and decrypted messages sent through encrypted Telegram channels, each suspect unmasked by a digital footprint that led investigators directly to their door, reinforcing the message that modern cartels rely on technology and only technology-driven enforcement can dismantle them. And as headlines faded, the gravity of the story endured, with officials across Washington and the nation citing the Seattle takedown as confirmation that the cartel threat was no longer a distant border issue but an internal one. And for the first time in years, the United States was pushing back, a sentiment punctuated in campaign speeches and political broadcasts by one number, repeated everywhere. 6.9 million potential deaths prevented, a statistic turned symbol, representing both what was saved and what remained at stake.